freedom ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity. Right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So Adam Schiff, that's two Fs.
Yeah, I heard
Schiff.
what President Trump referred to him as.
He's a noted conspiracy theorist, and he's going to be the House Intelligence Committee chairman, taking over for Devin Nunes because Democrats won the House. Devin Nunes sat down with Maria Bartiromo over the weekend on Sunday. Talk a little bit about what the House Intelligence Committee accomplished while he chaired it as it pertains to investigations into Russian collusion. We got our work done, and there are 4 buckets of documents that need the president's declassification, and that he hopes they get it. Here's Devin Nunes on what the American people now know, thanks to the House Intel Committee's work under his leadership.
The American people now know that the Trump campaign was unmasking American citizens. They know that many of the Trump campaign people were targeted. They know that they used a dossier that was paid for by the Clinton campaign to go after and use it in a FISA warrant against the campaign. So we're really proud of what we've done. We want the American people to see these 4 buckets of information that need to be declassified, and if the president would do that, it would, I think, give some finality to our investigation.
Now, he misspoke at the outset when he said Trump campaign unmasking individuals. He's talking about the Obama administration unmasking Trump campaign officials, like General Flynn. That's what he was talking about. So the 4 buckets of material for classification, Bartiromo and Nunes go through them.
The last FISA renewal, which was signed by Rod Rosenstein. You want to see Bruce Orr reports, which are the emails that you want to see from Bruce Orr and his wife and others. And you want to see the exculpatory evidence that was not presented to the FISA court. In other words, evidence that would say there was no collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians, but that actually wasn't presented to the FISA court. What is this 4th bucket? And am I right about the first 3?
Yeah, so the first 3, you're right on. We've been calling for those for many months. The president actually directed them to be done. And then you had Rod Rosenstein, who convened a meeting to stop that and get that kicked to the IG. But that's not a workable solution. We have let the White House know that. That's not going to work. That will just bury this, and none of it will ever be declassified. The new 4th bucket that we're asking actually to be declassified now is for months. We have been reviewing emails between FBI and DOJ and others that clearly show that they knew about information that should have been presented to the FISA court. So it is real evidence that people within the FBI withheld evidence from the FISA court. Now, these are classified, and they need to be declassified.
Yeah, I'd like to see all of that information declassified to the extent possible with the consideration for national security. And here's what I'd also like to see. The same thing Nunes wants to see upon Adam Schiff assuming the chairmanship of the House Intel Committee.
The Democrats on the committee and all through Congress have been saying that they have more than circumstantial evidence that the Trump campaign colluded with Russians. More than. So at the first open hearing that we're going to have, I'm looking forward to them finally releasing this information because we know that the only thing that hasn't leaked is this information about the Trump campaign colluding with Russians. So they've promised it. They now have the majority. So finally, maybe now they'll present their evidence.
How about it? How about finally presenting evidence to back up 18 months worth of fact-free rhetoric, at least evidence-free rhetoric? Now's your chance, Adam Schiff. We should be looking forward to him assuming the chairmanship. And for more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow for the Heritage Foundation. He's also a former FEC Commissioner and lawyer at the Department of Justice. Hans, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan. Hi, Amy.
Good. Hi. Thanks for being with us. With respect to what Nunes had to say about those buckets of information that should be declassified and the forthcoming moment of truth for Adam Schiff, how do you react?
Oh, I totally agree that it does need to be declassified because I think people have lost sight of how potentially dangerous what may have happened is. the unmasking, which has been largely forgotten by the media. Look, our intelligence agencies, it's very important that they can do things like, eavesdrop on overseas conversations where terrorists, may be calling their contacts in the U.S. But the law on this is very carefully structured to prevent intelligence agencies from being able to listen in on our phone calls. Citizens, you can't do that without getting a search warrant, and a search warrant means that you're suspected of criminal activity. And yet what was the White House under Obama doing? They were unmasking that information for political purposes. Unmasking it to go after the Trump campaign. That is the worst abuse of our intelligence agencies' capabilities that may have ever occurred in our history, and everybody just kind of ignores that. And that's just one of the problems that's been uncovered so far.
Well, who called for the unmasking? Who's responsible? Who's the ringleader?
Well, we know that the former UN ambassador to the UN from the Obama administration. We know that Susan Rice and others called for the unmasking, and that's the kind of thing that if it happened, that is so abusive that they should be prosecuted for it. And then the second issue that is really important is the FISA law. Look, again, that's a very important law. It's our Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. We set up a secret court so that if we determine that espionage is going on inside the United States or terrorism, they can get secretly from this court, electronic surveillance warrants. And yet here we have a case of this being used for the first time in history against a presidential campaign, the opposition campaign from the White House. And what do we find out? They didn't actually have any verified, credible information indicating wrongdoing. In fact, it was political opposition research that was used to justify the warrant. That is an unbelievable abuse of that law. And if it happened, again, things need to be done about that, and the people involved need to be punished.
Well, so if Nunes is right that Schiff has nothing, just as he's had nothing all this time, then how do the Democrats paper over that they have nothing to extend the, cloak and dagger intrigue that they want to envelop the White House regarding Russian collusion?
Well, I think they're just going to ignore that because, look, you all and I know that they don't have anything. If they had anything, it would have been uncovered by Bob Mueller. That's what he's been investigating for more than a year and a half. And we would by now have had indictments over that. Instead, to date, Bob Mueller hasn't turned up a single piece of evidence of any kind of collusion. So, Schiff just has been making this up because he knows nobody would call him on it in the media.
And so the play is just going to be to extend this through 2020 and just try and keep the cloud over. We're working on it. We're gonna add a couple of more charges to Paul Manafort's list of bill of particulars and so on and so forth. But I mean, essentially, just continue in the majority the same posture they took in the minority.
Oh yeah, and I think they're going to try to make sure that things get blocked that would actually reveal that nothing actually happened, and they will probably fight to make sure that there is no declassification, so that we can't actually see all of the rest of the FISA warrants. I just I don't trust them to do anything other than to try to cover up the fact that there's really no evidence that the Trump campaign was engaging in any wrongdoing of any kind, particularly when it comes to supposed collusion with the Russian government.
And one misdirection play that they're employing right now is the acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker.
Should he recuse himself?
Trying to undermine his legitimacy.
Yeah, and what people need to understand is that the president acted fully within federal law. There's actually a federal statute. It's called the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, which gives the power to the president to make this kind of temporary appointment. And these kind of temporary appointments have been made since George Washington was president, including, by the way, Barack Obama, who made several temporary appointments like this into Senate-confirmed jobs. And I don't seem to recall anybody complaining about that when Obama did it.
No. Do you think, I know he's acting Attorney General, do you think he will become the Attorney General, Whitaker, or who do you, or make Chris Christie? What do you think?
I don't know. I don't have any inside scoop on who the president is considering. You know, there's all kinds of names floating around. The key thing to remember is that under that federal statute that I just mentioned, Whitaker can only be the acting Attorney General for 210 days, about 7 months. It's a temporary appointment only, and the statute only allows him to do it for that period of time.
I wanted to get your take on this other latest tack that we're getting from the left. Paul Krugman wrote about it in the New York Times a couple weeks ago, and some egghead from NYU Law School has picked it up in the Wall Street Journal today. The idea that, we won the House, and that's great, but we didn't win the Senate, and that's a problem. And the problem is the structure of the Senate. And it's unfair that 600,000 people in Wyoming should get 2 U.S. senators, and 40 million people in California should also only get 2 U.S. senators. That disparity in population needs to be reflected in the Senate. That institution is no longer legitimate, and so Krugman doesn't provide a specific proposal, but this NYU law professor does. He suggests, for example, a trigger at 20-1, the six in terms of population disparity, and the 6 states exceeding 12 million people: California, Texas, New York, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Illinois, with about 40% of America's population, could split, yielding 12 new senators. That would dramatically reduce the Senate's structural inequality, for example. What do you think about this latest assault on the Senate by the left?
That's not just an assault on the Senate. It's an assault on our Constitution and the fundamental structure that the framers put together. The whole purpose of the Senate was to balance, to put balance into the government so that large population centers would not basically dominate the federal legislature, and the small states would be left out and would have no say. And that's what these liberals want. Is they want the big population areas, which tend to be pretty liberal, to be able to control the federal government and leave the rest of the country, the rural areas, the West, all the areas, by the way, that voted for Trump. They want them and their political power to be as weak as possible. That's what this is about.
Well, that's right. Yeah, they, in the interests of fairness, they want to dominate. That's the play. But it's interesting that Krugman opens the seal, and now you've got another professor opining in. So they're clearly going to start beating this drum more and more, at least on op-ed pages, if not having some, one of the loose cannons in the Democrat caucuses in the House or Senate pick it up as well.
Well, the rest of the country would never agree to this, which would require constitutional amendments, and that isn't going to happen.
He is Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow for the Heritage Foundation, former FEC Commissioner and attorney at the DOJ. Hans, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for having me, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.